The last thing Sarah Alcott heard before the wagon overturned was her own scream swallowed by dust. The stagecoach hit a rut in the red desert road and lurched sideways. Wood splintering, wheels spinning madly in the glare of the afternoon sun. The horses shrieked and bolted, and the coach tipped, throwing her into the dirt with a bone-jarring thud. For a few seconds she couldn't breathe. The sky above her spun white and cruel, a circle of blazing light in a world gone silent. When she finally pulled herself up, everything around her looked like the aftermath of a battle. The wagon lay on its side, one wheel still creaking, its axle cracked clean through. The driver, old Hank with the missing teeth and gentle laugh, lay twisted near the horses, his hat rolling down the slope like a leaf in the wind. Blood darkened the dust under his head. Sarah's throat tightened. She knelt beside him, pressing her shaking fingers to his neck. Nothing. She was alone. The land stretched out forever in every direction. Endless mesas, distant ridges, and an ocean of shimmering heat. The air smelled of sage and iron, the scent of a place that had forgotten mercy. The wind moaned across the open plain, carrying with it the faint cry of a hawk. Then HOOFBETS. Slow, measured, echoing against the canyon walls. She turned, squinting through the heat waves. Out from behind a rise came a rider, tall and bare-chested, his skin bronzed by years beneath the sun. His long black hair streamed behind him, tied with leather cords. Across his shoulders hung a rifle. Around his neck, a necklace of carved bone and turquoise. His horse, a dark, powerful Mustang, moved like liquid shadow over the dust. Sarah staggered toward him, her skirt torn, her breath rasping. "Please," she cried, waving an arm. "Please help me. They'll come back. They'll kill me if they find me here." The rider stopped several yards away. His gaze swept over her with the stillness of someone who measured everything before deciding its worth. His eyes were dark, so dark she couldn't see where iris ended and soul began. For a long moment, he said nothing. Only the wind spoke between them. Then he dismounted, the motion fluid, controlled. He looked at the broken wagon, the dead driver, then back at her. Finally, in a low voice that rolled like thunder over stone, he said, "If I take you with me, you will have to sleep among my dead." Sarah froze. What? His face was unreadable. "The place I rest tonight is sacred. To enter it, you must honor those who lie there. If your heart carries greed or lies, the spirits will find you before dawn." The words sent a chill crawling down her spine. She glanced behind her back toward the long road, where a rising dust cloud shimmered in the distance. Horses. Men. They were coming back. Her chest constricted. Ezra Pike and his men. She could see them even now in her mind, faces rough with drink and hate, guns glinting, shouting as the fire spread across her ranch. She'd run that night with nothing but her wedding ring and a satchel of coins, thinking she could disappear on the westbound coach. But Pike never let what he thought he owned escape. The Apache warrior turned his horse slightly, watching the same horizon she did. "You know them," he said flatly. Sarah nodded, trembling. "Please, I'll do anything. Just don't leave me here." He studied her for one long heartbeat, then swung himself onto the saddle and extended a hand. "Then come?" She hesitated only a second before grasping it. His palm was calloused, warm, steadying. He pulled her up behind him, and the Mustang lunged forward. The wind tore at her hair as they raced toward the distant mesas. The sound of the approaching riders fading behind them, the desert swallowed the road. The dust, the wreck, all the remnants of her old life died as the sun bled into the horizon. Painting the land in fire, Sarah clung to the stranger who smelled of earth and smoke. The only thing she knew for certain was that she had left one kind of death behind and was now riding straight toward another she didn't yet understand, and somewhere in the wind, she thought she heard voices low, echoing, whispering in a tongue older than the mountains themselves. The last streaks of daylight bled across the desert as Necho guided his horse into the narrow pass between two towering cliffs. The red stone glowed in the dying sun like walls of fire. Sarah clung to his waist, exhausted, her throat raw from dust and fear. Every hoofbeat echoed off the canyon walls like the ticking of a great clock counting down to something she didn't understand. They rode in silence for what felt like hours. The air grew cooler, the wind heavier. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote's lonely cry carried through the dusk. When the horse finally slowed, Sarah lifted her head and saw where he had brought her Dot. It was a wide, hidden basin between the cliffs, encircled by stone like the hollow of an open hand. The ground was white, not from sand, but from bones bleached under years of sun. Hundreds of them. Skulls, ribs, long femurs laid carefully in rows, all arranged in patterns that caught the light of the rising moon. Sarah's heart lurched. What is this place?" she whispered. Necho dismounted, his bare shoulders gleaming faintly in the moonlight. "The place where my family sleeps," he said. "This canyon is called White Hollow. No white man has stood here and lived." Sarah swallowed, her mouth dry. "Then why bring me?" He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Because you asked for my help, and now you must walk the same ground as my ancestors. The desert does not give safety freely." She looked again at the bones, their silent faces gleaming like 1,000 watchful eyes. "Are they angry with me?" "They are angry with all who forget." Necho led the horse to a circle of stones where a small fire pit sat waiting. He struck flint, and soon the flames rose, casting light over carvings etched into the canyon wall, shapes of horses, sons, and men locked in battle. The images seemed to move in the flickering firelight. Sarah sank to her knees near the flames, shivering even though the air was warm. "You said I'd have to sleep among your dead," she said, voice barely steady. "Did you mean here?" Necho nodded. "Yes, you will stay near the fire. The spirits will see your face. If they find no malice in your heart, they will let you greet the dawn. And if they do?" she asked. He looked at her, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "Then you will join them." Her stomach twisted, but something in his voice made her believe he wasn't trying to frighten her. He was warning her. As if he'd seen the desert take others before Dot as he unpacked herbs and tools from his saddlebag, she caught sight of strange objects, feathers, beads, small bones strung together like prayers. Each item seemed to hum with meaning. He glanced at her once. "You carry grief," he said. "It clings to you like smoke." "Who did you lose?" Sarah hesitated, staring into the fire. "My husband. They killed him. Burned our farm. I ran." Necho's hand stilled. "Who?" "The men from the railroad," she said bitterly. "They wanted our land for a track. We said no. They made sure no one else would do the same." For a long time, Necho said nothing. Then he muttered, "The snake that crawls across this land steals from us all. My people once hunted where your houses stand. They burned our lodges, took our children." He looked toward the bones, then back to her. "Now the same men hunt you. Perhaps the spirits will decide if you belong with them or with us." Sarah stared into the flames, her pulse loud in her ears. She didn't know if he meant to comfort her or curse her. Wind swept through the canyon, carrying the faint sound of chanting, distant, almost human. The fire flared higher. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of smoke and sage. Necho rose, lifting a carved staff from the ground. "They are awake," he said quietly. "My ancestors want to see you." Sarah's heart pounded. "See me?" He nodded. "The desert watches all who enter it. Tonight, you are not a stranger. You are being judged." She wanted to run, but the canyon felt alive, the shadows pulsing like breath. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling as Necho began to chant softly in Apache, low, rhythmic. The words blending with the wind dot, and as the moon climbed higher, Sarah thought she saw the bones shimmer, not from light, but from movement, as if something beneath the white earth had begun to stir. The canyon didn't sleep. Sarah lay beside the dying fire, her body trembling, listening to the wind hum through the narrow pass like 1,000 voices whispering in a tongue she couldn't understand. The moon hung cold and full over the white valley, and every time the clouds passed across it, the bones around her seemed to breathe. She pressed her hands together, whispering the Lord's Prayer, but her voice cracked halfway through. The air here felt alive, ancient, too heavy for her words to reach heaven. Across the fire, Necho sat cross-legged, eyes closed, humming a low, steady tone. Smoke from the burning sage curled around him like ghostly ribbons. The flicker of the flames made his skin glow bronze and his long hair shimmer like black silk. His calm unsettled her. Finally, she whispered, "Do they always come?" His eyes opened slowly. They never left. Sarah hugged her knees. "You really believe the dead walk here?" He studied her face, the firelight catching the faint scar at the corner of his mouth. "Not as you think. The bones remember. The air remembers. Sometimes that is worse." A gust of wind swept through the canyon, scattering ash into the air. From somewhere deeper within the stone walls came a faint, rhythmic sound, not thunder, but something like it. Slow, beating. A drum. Sarah's stomach twisted. "That sound, the spirits are awake," Necho said softly. He stood, his muscles moving like drawn bowstrings under his skin. "Do not leave the circle of fire. If they speak to you, answer with truth. If you lie, they will know." Before she could protest, he moved to the canyon's edge, standing tall under the moonlight. He lifted both hands and began chanting in Apache, his voice deep and resonant. The words rolled through the air, ancient and mournful. The wind grew wild. The fire flared blue. Sarah's heart pounded as shadows began to move between the bones, faint. Rippling shapes rising from the earth like smoke turned solid. She gasped, pressing her hands over her mouth. Faces. Dozens of them. Ghostly outlines of men, women and children, their eyes glinting like dim stars. They surrounded the fire but never crossed its glow. Necho's chant deepened, his voice breaking with emotion. Sarah saw tears glisten on his cheek. The spirit swayed as if listening. One shadow drifted closer, smaller, frailer than the rest, a child no older than 10. Its hand reached toward Necho. He lowered his head, whispering something that made the wind falter. Sarah couldn't move. Her fear melted into awe. The child vanished, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and wildflowers. The canyon fell silent again, the air heavy with what had just passed. When Necho returned to the fire, his face was pale, his breathing unsteady. Sarah looked at him, her voice trembling. "Was that your family?" He sat, staring into the flames. "My brother," he said quietly. "He died before his 10th summer. I promised him peace. But peace is hard to find in a land that forgets its dead." Sarah's eyes softened. "You talk to them like they can hear you." He turned his gaze to her. "Can you not hear your husband when the wind moves through the grass?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She remembered nights on her burned farm, when she'd thought she'd heard her husband's voice whisper her name through the smoke. She had told herself it was memory. But now, in this place where bones spoke through wind, she wasn't so sure. Necho leaned forward, tossing a handful of herbs into the fire. The smoke turned white, curling upward like fingers. "You are not hunted by men alone," he said. "You are hunted by what you have not faced." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "You carry guilt," he said. You think you could have saved him." Her breath hitched. Tears stung her eyes. "How do you know that?" "Because I know what guilt smells like," Necho said softly. "It clings to you the way the desert clings to blood." For a long time, neither spoke. Only the crackle of the fire filled the space between them. Then, slowly, Sarah reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a small, scorched locket, the only thing she had left. She opened it, revealing a tiny portrait of her husband smudged with ash. "I can't keep running," she whispered. "But I don't know where else to go." Necho's gaze softened. "Then stay here until the dawn. If the spirits mean you harm, they will take you before first light." She looked at him, fear and trust warring inside her. "And if they don't?" He stared into the glowing coals. "Then maybe they have chosen to give you back your life." Sarah lay beside the dying fire once more, the canyon quiet now except for the sigh of wind through bone. The stars shimmered like watchful eyes above her, and as her eyelids grew heavy, she thought she heard a whisper float through the night, a man's voice, familiar and tender. "Run no more, Sarah." She didn't know if it came from her dreams or from the desert itself. Sarah hadn't slept since the night she saw the faces in the fire. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw them again, men with hollow eyes, their mouths moving silently in prayer, and the Apache warrior, his shadow stretching long across the desert, like something caught between man and ghost by dawn. The desert had turned gold again, soft and deceptive, as if the horrors of the night had been nothing more than a fever dream. But Sarah knew better. When she turned, Tatsi was already awake, sharpening a blade with slow, rhythmic strokes. His chest glistened with a faint sheen of sweat, muscle shifting beneath bronze skin, and around his neck hung a new strand of turquoise beads, fresh, bright and wet with what she feared might be blood. She watched him, trying to steady her voice. "You killed last night, didn't you?" Tatsi looked up, eyes unreadable. "I freed a spirit that wanted to go home." Sarah didn't understand. He rose, towering above her, and threw a pelt across her shoulders. "Cover yourself. The sun is strong. You walk with me today." They moved through the desert in silence, their footsteps crunching against dry earth. Every time the wind shifted, Sarah caught the faint scent of burning sage. She followed him down into a ravine where the ground was scarred with black stones arranged in a perfect spiral. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice trembling. Tatsi knelt, placing his knife into the center of the spiral. "This is where my brother died. This is where I swore no white man would ever cross my path and live." Sarah stepped back. Her throat went dry. "Then why am I still alive?" He stood slowly, turning toward her. "Because you did not run." His words lingered in the air. Sarah looked down at her blistered hands and torn dress. She had wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The desert stretched endlessly, a merciless sea of heat and silence. Tatsi began to dig into the sand with his bare hands, unearthing a small leather pouch. Inside were two items: a small carved bone shaped like a hawk, and a piece of cloth red, faded, and torn. He held them out to her. "This belonged to the one who betrayed my people," he said. "He came here wearing this, asking for mercy. He burned the camp when I refused." Sarah looked at the cloth and froze. It was part of a soldier's jacket, her husband's regiment. Her pulse quickened. "My husband. He rode with the 12th Cavalry." She whispered. "Taz high single quotes S gaze turned to fire." "Then you walk under his sins." Sarah stumbled back, tears stinging her eyes. "I didn't know what he did." "I swear to you." Tatsi closed the pouch and tied it to his belt. His voice dropped low, dark as thunder. "Then prove it. How?" He took her hand, slicing her palm with the tip of his blade before she could pull away. She gasped, but he caught her wrist firmly, pressing his own bleeding hand to hers. The blood mingled hot, metallic, and sacred. "Now your spirit is bound to mine," he said. "If you lie again, the earth will take you." Sarah's knees weakened. The world spun around her. She wanted to scream, but something deep in his eyes, something ancient and grieving, stopped her. He looked toward the horizon, where vultures circled above the cliffs. "There is a storm coming," he said quietly. "When it passes, you will see who you are." By sunset, they reached the ruins of an old mission. Its stone walls were half buried in sand, the wooden cross leaning at a crooked angle. Inside, the air was cool and heavy with dust. Sarah sank to the ground, clutching her wounded hand. "Why bring me here?" Tatsi traced symbols on the cracked wall with ash. "Because the ones you call holy built this place on our burial ground. They thought the desert would forget. It never does." As night fell, the first drops of rain began to fall, soft, hesitant, rare. Lightning flashed across the horizon, illuminating Tatsi's figure standing tall against the storm, his long hair whipping in the wind, his chest marked with streaks of blood and ash. He looked back at her once, his voice deep and haunting. "You begged for help," he said. "Now you will learn what it costs." And as thunder rolled across the desert, Sarah realized that what she feared most was not the man before her, but the part of herself that was beginning to understand him. The first drop of rain struck Sarah's cheek like a warning. Then the sky broke open. The desert, once so dry it cracked under her feet, now roared with life. Lightning carved jagged lines across the horizon. Thunder rolled through the canyons like the drums of some ancient war. And the smell of wet earth rose thick and wild. Sarah stumbled into the ruined mission, clutching her wounded hand. The place was nothing but shadows and echoes, crumbling walls, rotted pews, and a crooked wooden cross that swayed each time the wind howled. Tazi followed, silent as a wolf. His dark hair was soaked, his chest slick with rain, turquoise beads glinting faintly whenever lightning flashed through the shattered roof. "You should rest," he said quietly, kneeling near the cold hearth. His deep voice carried over the storm like a drumbeat. Sarah didn't move. "You tied me to your curse," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why? What do you want from me?" He didn't look up. "Truth." The single word cut through the sound of thunder. Sarah pressed her bleeding palm to her chest. "I told you the truth. I didn't know what my husband did." Tatsi's jaw tightened. He threw a handful of kindling into the hearth and struck flint. Sparks jumped to life. "Every woman says that when the blood of her men runs through the sand." Her voice rose. "And every man like you blames a woman for a war she didn't start." The fire caught. For a moment, their faces were lit in orange light, hers pale, streaked with rain and dirt. His carved from shadow and fury. Then, without a word, Tatsi stood and walked to the corner of the ruined chapel. He pulled aside a rotting wooden board, revealing a bundle wrapped in animal hide. Inside lay relics, silver buttons, rifle shells, a blood-soaked piece of blue fabric with faded cavalry insignia. Sarah's breath caught. She recognized it. "That's the 12th Cavalry," she said softly. "My husband's company." Tatsi's eyes darkened. "They came here under a white flag. They promised peace. Then they opened fire on our camp. My brother was 12. The thunder cracked overhead, sharp and merciless. Sarah turned away, tears blurring her vision. "I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't." Tatsi's voice softened, barely above the storm. "Then why did your husband carry Apache bones back to town? Why did he sell them for gold?" Her knees weakened. She sank against the wall, shaking. "He told me they were relics. He said they belonged to thieves and raiders. He lied to me." Tatsi's expression changed, rage giving way to something quieter, more wounded. He stepped closer, rain dripping from his hair, the sound of thunder fading into a steady heartbeat between them. For the first time, Sarah saw not just a warrior, but a man who had lost everything. Lightning flashed again, and for a second, she thought she saw the faint outline of other figures in the shadows, ghostly shapes moving in the corners of the mission, whispering in a language she couldn't understand. "Tatsi," she whispered, "do you see them too?" He nodded slowly. "They come when the blood remembers." The firelight flickered, casting their shadows on the wall, hers trembling. His steady doubt, he sank down across from her, his gaze steady. "When this storm ends, we will go to the mountain. There you will speak to the dead. If they forgive you, I will too." Sarah met his eyes, her breath shallow. "And if they don't? Then the desert will decide." Outside, the rain poured harder. Wind howled through the broken chapel windows, carrying voices low, mournful, and ancient. Sarah pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders, her wounded hand throbbing in rhythm with the storm. "Why are you helping me?" she asked finally. "If you hate what I am?" Tatsi's gaze softened just enough for her to see the truth behind it. "Because once," he said, "I begged for help too, and no one came." The fire crackled between them, smoke curling upward like a prayer that couldn't find heaven. And as the storm raged outside, Sarah realized she was no longer afraid of dying. She was afraid of what she might discover when the storm finally passed. The storm broke by dawn, leaving the desert washed clean and silent. A faint mist clung to the mesas, and the world smelled of wet earth, smoke, and new beginnings. But for Sarah, the silence was heavy like the breath before a verdict. She followed Tatsi up the mountain path, her boots sinking into the soft red mud. The sun crept through the clouds in narrow beams, glinting off his damp skin. His long black hair, still wet from the storm, clung to his shoulders as he climbed barefoot, silent, sure-footed as if he belonged to the mountain itself. Sarah stumbled behind, every step a reminder of her fear and the blood oath that bound her to him. "Where are we going?" she asked breathlessly. "To where the earth still remembers," he said. "The mountain holds what the desert took." The path narrowed between cliffs painted with ancient symbols. Faded red and white figures danced across the stone, warriors, animals, storms. Sarah brushed her fingers against them, and for a moment the air grew colder. As if unseen eyes were watching, they reached a clearing where a single stone pillar rose from the earth, carved with the faces of old chiefs. The wind moaned through the cracks, low and mournful. Tazi stopped. He knelt before the pillar, placing his palm on the stone. "This is where my people called to the spirits when the white soldiers came. It is where they died standing." Sarah looked at the carvings, each one eroded by wind and time. "And you think they'll listen to me?" Tatsi rose slowly. "If your heart is true, yes. If not, they will know." He motioned for her to kneel beside him. Reluctantly, she did. Her knees sank into the cool mud, her hands trembling. The mountain air felt thin, sharp with the scent of pine and old smoke. Tatsi began to chant, a deep rhythmic sound that echoed through the cliffs. He threw handfuls of white ash into the fire he'd built, and as the smoke curled upward, the air shimmered. Sarah blinked. And suddenly the clearing wasn't empty anymore. Figures formed in the smoke, men and women, their faces painted, their eyes glowing faintly like embers. One stepped forward, his chest scarred, his hair streaked with white feathers. He looked at Sarah. Tazi single quotes as voice was steady. "She walks with the blood of those who burned our dead. The desert waits for your word." The spirit's gaze pierced her. "Why do you come, white woman?" Sarah swallowed hard. Her voice broke. "Because I didn't know. I didn't know what he did my husband. I can't change what happened, but I can carry the truth." The spirit's expression shifted, unreadable. "Truth costs blood." Sarah held up her palm, the cut from Tatsi's blade still raw. "Then take mine." The wind howled, circling her like a living thing. The fire flared blue, and for a heartbeat, Sarah felt 1,000 memories flood her mind-burning camps, screaming children, the smell of gunpowder. She saw Tatsy's brother fall, saw her husband laughing as he loaded his rifle. She cried out, collapsing forward, her hands sinking into the mud. The visions vanished, leaving her shaking. Tazi caught her shoulders, steadying her. "Now you see," he said softly. Tears streamed down her face. "He was a monster," she whispered. "And I stayed beside him." Tatsi knelt before her, his face close enough for her to see the faint scar running down his jaw. "You carry no weapon. You burn no camp. You cannot change his blood, but you can honor the dead he shamed." "How?" He reached into his pouch and drew out a single eagle feather bound with red string. "Carry this to the river below. Cast it where the water runs fastest. Let the spirits take his sins." Sarah took the feather in trembling hands. "And what about you?" He looked toward the rising sun. "When your husband's sins are gone, maybe my hate will be too." She rose, clutching the feather. The mountain wind caught her hair, whipping it across her face. "Will I see you again after this?" Tatsi didn't answer. His eyes were on the horizon, where the desert stretched endless and bright. "Go," he said finally. "Before I remember what I swore to do." Sarah turned and began down the path, her heart pounding with fear and something else, something like sorrow. When she reached the edge of the cliffs, she looked back. Tatsi was still there, standing before the fire, his body framed by the smoke and the faces of his ancestors. His long black hair whipped in the wind, his skin gleaming like burnished bronze under the morning light. He raised his hand once, not in threat, but in farewell, and as Sarah descended toward the river, clutching the sacred feather, she realized the desert was no longer just a place of death. It was a place where truth demanded to be seen. The river shimmered like glass beneath the noon sun, winding through the red canyon like a scar that refused to heal. Sarah stood on the rocky bank, mud-streaked and trembling, clutching the eagle feather Tatsi had given her. The wind whistled through the cliffs, carrying with it the faint echo of his chant, a rhythm that refused to leave her mind. Each step toward the water felt heavier than the last. The current was fast, wild from the storm that had passed the night before. It roared as though alive, hungry for truth, for redemption, for blood. Sarah knelt at the edge, her reflection rippling. Her eyes looked older now, not the frightened woman who had begged for help days ago, but someone reborn through pain and revelation. She held the feather above the water. "For your people," she whispered, "for mine, and for the ones who never found peace." The wind stilled. Then, as she opened her fingers, the feather drifted down, light as a breath, and touched the surface. It spun once, then vanished beneath the rushing water. A soft rumble echoed from the cliffs. Sarah looked up, heart pounding. For a moment, she thought she saw shapes moving in the mist above the river, ghostly silhouettes of warriors, mothers and children, their eyes calm, no longer filled with pain. She closed her eyes. "Let it end," she whispered. "Please." Let it end. The sound of footsteps broke her prayer. Tatsi stood behind her. His long black hair fluttered in the wind, still streaked with ash from the sacred fire. His chest was bare, marked with painted symbols of mourning. Around his neck, the turquoise and bone jewelry glinted like the eyes of his ancestors. He was silent for a long time, watching the river. "You did it," he said finally. Sarah rose slowly, turning toward him. "Did they forgive me?" Tatsi's gaze was unreadable. "They did not speak your name." But the wind changed direction. "That is enough." The river's roar softened, as though listening. Sarah swallowed. "And you? Will you forgive me?" Tatsi's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the fire inside them dimmed. "Forgiveness is not a gift I can give," he said. It is a thing you must carry until it no longer hurts. She nodded, tears welling. Then I'll carry it. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sound was the rushing river and the cries of distant eagles overhead. Then Tatsi stepped closer, reaching into the small pouch at his belt. He drew out a piece of polished obsidian, smooth as water. "Take this," he said. "It will remind you what truth costs." Sarah accepted it with trembling fingers. "And what will remind you?" He looked away toward the horizon where the desert stretched endless and bright. "You will." A lump formed in her throat. "Will I see you again?" Tatsi's lips curved into something between a smile and a shadow. "You will hear me in the wind." "That will be enough." He turned to leave, his figure framed by the blazing light. Sarah wanted to call after him, to thank him, to curse him. She didn't know which, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she watched as he disappeared into the canyon, his silhouette merging with the shifting mirage of heat and dust. The river kept flowing. Carrying the feather and the sins it bore far beyond her sight, Sarah sank to her knees, pressing the obsidian stone to her chest. She could still hear his voice, low and steady. "When your husband's sins are gone, maybe my hate will be too." The wind rose again, warm and dry, wrapping around her like a whisper. Somewhere in it, she thought she heard his chant, soft, distant, eternal. And for the first time in years, she felt the weight in her chest lift. Just enough to breathe again. She looked toward the horizon where the sky burned orange and gold. The desert was no longer an enemy. It was a witness, vast, brutal, and beautiful. Sarah turned away from the river, walking toward the open land. The obsidian stone still clutched in her hand. Behind her, an eagle soared above the canyon, circling once before vanishing into the light. The past was gone, carried downstream with the feather. But somewhere in the heart of the desert, a warrior's spirit watched her go, and for the first time, it did not burn with rage. It watched with peace.